Just give us a few seconds. Loads of you here already though, which is brilliant to see. So thank you for joining us. Okay, so we'll get started. So welcome again to the next edition of Ignite. Great to see that you're all coming back month after month. I've been learning so much already, so I'm sure you have as well. Just a bit of housekeeping as always before we start. Please do keep yourself on mute just so that we can keep call quality as good as possible. As always, we are going to be recording this and live streaming it on YouTube, so if you don't want to be seen, then do just turn your cameras off. You can turn them back on again when you go into the breakout rooms. We will have a presenter with us today, so if you would like to get the best experience, then I would suggest putting it on side-by-side view so that you can see both the presenter and the presentation at the same time. And as always, do keep engaged on Twitter. So we've got @BC Coaches and also @TheWellHQ this evening, and just use the hashtag Ignite Monthly so people can follow the topic. We do obviously have the chat going as well, and I'm sure lots of you have been finding loads of really useful resources and connections in the chat. Probably for this evening, I'd suggest maybe trying to keep it on topic, which most of you already know is going to be on the pelvic floor. So try and keep it on topic for that kind of main content. And as always, we'll go into breakout rooms where you can chat to each other and share any questions and suggestions. So for those of you who haven't been on before, my name is Julia. I'm the coaching clubs officer in the Southwest, and on the call from British Cycling, we've also got Tiffany Fletcher, Karen Lifford and Melissa Teasdale, and as always we've got Robbie George handling all things technical for us. So we're going to go straight into things this evening, just because we've got lots to go through. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Baz Moffat from The Well, who's going to talk to us all about the pelvic floor.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Julia, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Baz Moffat, and I used to be on the British rowing team. Rowing was my thing. I was on the team for 4 years, and then I was a personal trainer. And over the last 6 years, really, since having my children, I've specialised in pelvic health, pelvic floor health. And I feel it's the reason I've been put on this earth is to help women with their pelvic floors. And I'm also really, really passionate about the fact that it's not just a mum thing. It's you have permission to have pelvic floor issues if you are a mum for obvious reasons, because, you know, a baby may well have come out of your vagina. But in actual fact, we know that, you know, it's a menopausal thing and it's also an athletic thing. When I start going through my presentation, you will see that in actual fact, in some sports, the rates of pelvic floor dysfunction are up to 3 times that we see in the normal population. But that discussion is just not happening in sport. And it definitely impacts on performance, but it also impacts on our women's health, which is what we're going to be going into today. And so over the last year, I've set up The Well with 2 other wonderful women. I've got Dr. Bella, who's a women's health GP, and we've got Dr. Emma Ross, who was part of the EIS system. She was the head of physiology, co-lead of physiology, working with all the Olympic and Paralympic teams. And what we've done now is that we've created the Well HQ, which is all about educating and empowering women so that we fundamentally believe that health can sit alongside performance, and that for too long it's all been about performance without actually looking after a female's health. And there's been this, you know, I know, because I was in the British system for when I, you know, sort of 10, 12 years ago, it was all about equality then. It was all about we need to be fighting for the same as the men. But as we had that discussion, we took out the female parts of being an athlete, and without a doubt, pelvic floor health is a fundamental part of being female. So we're gonna go through that today. Let me just share my screen. So I've got a presentation. She says, I did have a presentation. Give me a minute. Sorry, it was working perfectly. Here we go. Right. Give me present. Right. Can you see, Julie, can you see that okay? Has anything come up?
It's just loading. It looks like it's about to. I'll let you know when it's come up.
Right. Give me 1 second. Right, let me just go in again.
Yeah, no problem.
Worth the wait. Here we go.
No rush. And I can't.
Right, there we go. You got it.
Perfect before. Yeah.
Panic when texting work. All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay. So here's some statistics to show you why pelvic health is an athletic thing. So I'm going to deal with cycling in a second, but if we just look at the overall athletic population, when research was done in the UK, it came back that 40% of athletes reported leaking during training or competition. Now, that's not 40% of all athletes. That is across the board. So that will be over 80% of gymnasts and trampolinists, a high percentage of track and field athletes, volleyball players, basketball players, that kind of thing, and about 1% of golfers. So cycling is going to be towards this end of the spectrum in terms of the rates of stress incontinence are going to be quite low because there is no stress involved in cycling, but there will be other issues which I will go through. The key thing for me in this statistic is that zero of these athletes actually had a conversation with anyone that mattered. And I know that we've got a coach, like lots of coaches on the call, but when Emma and I went out, we saw this research, we're like, wow, my goodness, who's having these conversations with these athletes with all this dysfunction? And not one doctor, sports doctor, not one physio, not one strength and conditioning coach, or not one coach had ever had a conversation about that. And that just shows how this is normalized in sport. We honestly watched Olympic standard gymnasts standing on talking to us who said, actually, when we go on to our Olympic final, the only thing we can think about is have I got enough time to empty my bladder one more time so that I don't leak during this routine in front of millions and millions of people. And that fear of leaking is as important as leaking. So even if you're not going to leak, it kind of really, really, really impacts people. And these are athletes that love their sport. They adore what they do. If you look at the normal population, people that know they should be exercising, and there may well be people on this course, on this workshop tonight that are responsible for more kind of like recreational types of people, this stuff just floors them. So 60% of women who experience leaking during sport list it as the number one reason not to be active. So they're like, if they leak doing something, they just stop doing it. And so this is a participation issue as well as a performance issue. And when you're talking with athletes about how they manage that, many times they just stop drinking. It's like they just try and self-manage, and they stop hydrating themselves in the belief it actually makes it worse, but in the belief that if they haven't got fluid coming into their system, then they won't be leaking. And obviously that has clear issues when it comes to sports performance. Right, so some of you, I'm obsessed with the pelvic floor, but those of you that are not may well have not seen this quote. Now, for me, pelvic floor dysfunction is normalized too often. So this was, it's called an advertorial. It's where they, it was sponsored by Tenor Lady. It was made to look like an article in The Guardian, whereas in actual fact it was an advert. And it's essentially saying that this lady lifts really heavy weights. She leaks a bit, but that just makes her badass, and that's totally okay. And I think all of us have probably seen the sanitary pad, the oops moments where they just try and make it look quite infantile, and they kind of like, oh my goodness. There's a horrible advert out last year about a new mum who, this gorgeous, this white middle class, mum, kind of like with her baby, like how cute it was. And she said, but I didn't expect there to be I didn't expect to be leaking, but that's okay because I've got these pads. And I have no problem with pads, right? I have no problem with women having to wear pads to help, if they are leaking. But the problem for me is when they see that as the fix. It's not the fix, because there is many more things that you can do, which I will be 100% going through tonight. And I really want to make sure that everyone on this call knows how to fix pelvic floor dysfunction. But the companies with the products have the marketing budget that the women's health physios and sport doesn't have. And so they're just pushing these products on these, who I would say vulnerable women, saying, don't worry about it, just pop in a pad. But if you flip leaking or pain in your vulva, pain in your whatever type of issue you have in your pelvic floor, whether it's painful sex, pain in your vulva, like feelings of heaviness, anything, if you flip that to another part of your body, you just wouldn't put up with it. And I often use leaking urine because it's the most significant issue that many women experience with their pelvic floor. But if you were leaking urine out of your ear, coaches wouldn't stand there and watch you, first of all, doing it, and you'd go and get help. But at the moment, it takes women 7 years to go and see a doctor and to ask for help. And it's only if the doctor is female, old enough, and asks a question. And so women are living with this because it's not life-threatening, but we know that women are living for such a long time now. Well, we're all living for such a long time now that we need to have our continence, and it needs to be a part of our education so women understand like what this pelvic floor should be doing and shouldn't be doing. Okay, so I am going to show you what the pelvic floor is, because when I decided that I was going to be that pelvic floor was my thing, I had 2 births quite close together. So I had my first child, and it was a really, really traumatic experience. And then I had my second child sort of 16 months after that. And it was that second birth experience that I just realized that I wanted to go deeper with women. I wanted to go to the absolute fundamentals of kind of who they are. I know that sounds really woo and away with the fairies, but I just think that every single woman has a pelvic floor, and if it goes wrong, it's poo, sex, and wee, and that's why women leave it for such a long time. Whereas actually, if you create an environment where women feel safe and not judged and not embarrassed to talk about this, the fix is most of the time really easy. And what's happened with pelvic floor health is it's become more and more specialized, and it's become more and more medical. And I'm not medically trained. I have no medical training. And if Dr. Bella, who is medically trained, was on here, she would say that I know far more than she does. And she has learned from me, because some situations you need medical help. You do need medical help. But what I feel is that there are so many issues that can be sorted out with a holistic, conservative approach. And if we're all doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that every day, then in actual fact, we stay away from that medical surgical option, which is what we're all after. So this is the female pelvis on the screen here. And it's a group of muscles and ligaments. Okay, so this is like another model of the pelvis, which you can see here. It's a group of muscles and ligaments, right, which sits underneath the pelvis. Men have a pelvic floor too, but they don't have a vagina, they don't have babies, and they don't go through menopause, which is why, although they have pelvic floor dysfunction, we have it at much higher rates than men do. If you're a gynecologist or a women's health physio, you will need to know a lot more detail about this pelvic floor. But for many, this is like a surprise. Like most of you won't even have seen a pelvic floor. You won't even know where it is. You kind of know it's in your bottom, but that's about it. It attaches to your pubic bone at the front, and then your coccyx at the back. And it's kind of a group, it's a sling, it's a group of muscles, okay? And it holds up on the inside your bladder at the front, your uterus in the middle, and then your bowels at the back. Now, I know some people have had hysterectomies, and so the uterus won't be there anymore. But essentially, that's kind of like how the pelvis has been created, which is why I know I've said it. That's why when the pelvic floor doesn't work properly, it's poo, sex, and wee, isn't it? And that's why, because that's what's in the pelvis. So the pelvic floor is there to hold everything up, right? It has to have the strength to hold what is above it. So if you are overweight, which is unlikely in the world of cycling, but if you are overweight, the pelvis has to carry more weight. The pelvic floor has to carry more weight. So that's why the incidence of pelvic floor dysfunction are higher in if you're overweight or obese. It also has to be able to relax and let go, right? So it has to be able to relax and let go so that you can fully empty your bladder and fully empty your bowels. Now, funnily enough, because there's so little research done on women when it comes to anything, there's very little research done on the pelvic floor as well. And there's even less research done on athletic populations. The research that is done tends to be done on older women. But there are 2 theories as to why the rates of pelvic floor dysfunction are so much higher in athletes. And we don't know the answer. So one theory is that the constant impact, the constant weights, the constant pressure on the pelvic floor stretches and weakens the pelvic floor, right? So that's theory number one. Theory number two is that athletes are so strong that the pelvic floor gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and it gets too tight. So some of you might have heard of a tight pelvic floor, a hypertonic pelvic floor. Many cyclists feel they have this, and many cyclists who I've worked with who said they want to come out of the sport and go and have a baby and come back in again are fearful of having a vaginal delivery because they feel their pelvic floor is too tight and won't be able to let go. And so that might be the case, it might not be the case, but those are the kind of the two theories as to why we think athletes may well have higher rates of pelvic floor issues than the rest of the population. These are the factors, and I'll run through them relatively quickly. These are the factors that kind of affect the pelvic. These are the factors that kind of like make pelvic floor issues more likely. So I put having a vagina in there, and that's when I went back to saying that men have pelvic floors too. It's the third hole, and it doesn't have a sphincter, so that if there's an increase in pressure from above, that's the body just goes for the path of least resistance. So if you're thinking about not necessarily when you're on the bike, but when you're doing any strength and conditioning or strength training, I went to the gym. I am not elite anymore, far off it, but it was interesting for me to experience this. I went to the gym the other day and I did a strength session, and we were doing front squats. And the trainer, bless her heart, she was obviously quite young, and I just couldn't be bothered telling her that I kind of knew all this stuff anyway, but I was just like, I'll just let her do her thing. And she said, right, what I want you to do is I want you to hold your breath at the top, go down into your squat, come up and breathe out at the top. And she's been taught this at PT school, right? She's been taught that's how you need to teach everyone to breathe. I wasn't lifting anywhere near my max. I did not need that amount of pressure in my core to do that lift. And in actual fact, if I carry on lifting like that, then I will leak probably, and I will have an increased risk of prolapse, which is where the vagina wall isn't strong enough to hold the weight above it. And this is where understanding how the core works is really, really important. This pelvic floor works with the diaphragm. Okay, so you've got your pelvic floor here, and you've got your diaphragm here, and you've got your deep core muscles at the front, and you've got your back muscles at the back, right? And so what happens with the pelvic floor and the diaphragm is as the diaphragm comes down as you breathe in, then the pelvic floor should relax and let go because the internal organs are pushing it down. And as you exhale, then the pelvic floor should come up, and it kind of provides this lovely core, this core strength, but in a dynamic way. Now, I don't know where cycling is with its core training at the moment. I know where rowing training was with its core training 10 years ago, and it was all about core stability, and it was all about holding and fixing and tightening and protecting, which is kind of all right when you're doing max lifts and when you're lifting hard, but that's not how we should be all the time, because our body works dynamically, and the pelvic floor is a huge part of this core training. And if you're not training like that, if you're not using your pelvis as part of your core, then what happens is that there's too much pressure going down to the vagina. Pregnancy and childbirth, we know that more and more women are, pregnancy doesn't equal stop, okay? And so we know that more women are wanting to be active throughout their pregnancy, and also more and more women are wanting to have a baby and come back into fairly high level, top level of competition, but the whole way through the pyramid, like women will be wanting to return to training. And I think that as coaches, we need to be very responsible for those women, and we don't have to be scared of them. I have worked with a Paralympian who was whose team literally, she got pregnant and they were like, oh God, like we don't know what to do. And she was a highly trained individual who could follow a program, but as soon as she didn't know what to do, she honestly sat on a sofa eating Jaffa cakes. And she came to me, she did nothing, no exercise whatsoever, because there was nothing to do. And so I think that this is what I mean about we need to not keep women medical. You don't have to just go and see a medic because you're pregnant, or because you do for the pregnancy bit, but not for your exercise and your training. And I think that everybody that works with women should have a knowledge around pregnancy and childbirth and know when the red flags are, who they should pass them on to, but should be able to like help and support them within their programs. Sexual abuse is like 10% of us will have women will have experienced some kind of sexual abuse, and that has a huge impact on the pelvic floor. It is just a muscle, so at a microscopic level, the muscles in the pelvic floor look the same as the muscles in the bicep, the muscles in the hamstring, the muscles in the quads, but it's a very vulnerable, intimate and private part of our bodies. And so if you've experienced any abuse, any medical exam that's made you like really uneasy, then actually women can massively struggle with that, and their pelvic floor will actually just be so tight that they just can't relax and let go. Being an athlete, I've already gone through. Overweight and sedentary, I've gone through. Injury and surgery, like we are so far on now in terms of our understanding of fascia, and how that actually, if there's any kind of surgery anywhere, if you have any scar tissue anywhere in your body, then that there's like ramifications throughout the body. And I find that all the time, that women may have had keyhole surgery for a kidney, or might have, or a C-section, for example, and that will actually have a big impact on their ability, on their pelvic floor health. And menopause and aging, as we age, our muscle strength deteriorates anyway, and pelvic floor will happen then. But it seems to drop off a cliff when we get to menopause. And whether we're talking about increased urges or increased stress incontinence, then that happens with menopause, because estrogen levels have plummeted, and the pelvic floor just has so many estrogen receptors that if the estrogen isn't coming into the system, then actually that pelvic floor strength is really, really impacted, which is why we need to get ahead of the curve. Okay, so this list here is quite depressing, and often if I was presenting this live, you would physically sense the energy in the room going, oh God, like, because women are literally going, yeah, got that. So all this stuff is not life-threatening, and in many situations it is seen as fairly normal. Okay, so I'll go through briefly what they all mean. Urinary stress incontinence is when you leak when there's an increase in pressure. So that increase in pressure can come from above, so from laughing, coughing, sneezing, or it can come from impact from below, from jumping, running, landing. Urge incontinence, and this is something which many athletes struggle with, and I've actually talked with a lot of them who started having this after COVID and returning to sport. So urge incontinence is when you have an irresistible urge to empty your bowels or empty your bladder. So the bowels thing you might find that's hormonal. So you might find that at certain times of the month you have this, what some people call a period poo. Some people have this like just irresistible urge to empty your bladder, and you just can't hold on. You absolutely have to go to the toilet. Some people might have it when they have a coffee. Like often they go, oh, I know that after I've had a coffee and after I had cereal in the morning, 15, 20 minutes later, I need to go to the toilet. And that's not a bad thing. That's good. It kind of like I can manage that into my day. It becomes an issue if you don't have that level of understanding. But urge incontinence can also be that you're out on a long ride and that you're approaching home, training venue, wherever that might be, and you feel you have to empty your bladder, and you feel like you can't get to the toilet in time to empty your bladder, and you may well leak, or that you just have this absolute fear of leaking. I was working with someone who'd their national training centre had closed due to COVID, and then it opened up again a few months later. There was no one really knew what was happening with the Olympics. No one really knew what was happening with trials. There was a lot of kind of stress and tension. And she suddenly started experiencing this urge, this irresistible urge. So like there was 3 or 4 women's cubicles. She knew that if she went into that, so what should happen in terms of like the Pavlov's dog's response is that you sit on the toilet, and that is your trigger to like relax your pelvic floor. And it just happens instinctively. But what happens with this urge incontinence is that she was seeing a toilet. So she was seeing the door of the cubicle, and then she just couldn't hold on. And so she was like, I must not going to go to the toilet at the training venue. So she stopped drinking, and she was there for hours, stopped drinking and stopped going to the loo. And so that she ain't going to stay healthy for very long. And actually, she didn't need any pelvic floor help from me. She went and worked with a psychologist and worked on her stress and her anxiety around returning to training. And that really, really helped her. Diastasis, we don't really need to go into this evening, but that's what happens with pregnant women. Like 100% of pregnant women will have a tummy gap, and sometimes it doesn't always go back together. Constipation is I'm not, this is my second favorite subject. I won't do a whole webinar on constipation, but think about what I talked about with the pelvis. You've got your bowels at the back, okay? Women are twice as likely as men to be constipated, and as we age, we are more likely to be constipated. And also constipation is not just because you're not drinking enough water or eating enough vegetables. It can be that, but it's also highly emotional. So you will find, and hormonal. So you may find at certain times of the month you're more constipated than other times, or that if you're in a high stress situation. I know that bowels can go the other way, but like sometimes that you might just feel that if you've got that chronic low level of stress and anxiety, then actually you can get quite constipated. That has an issue on the pelvic floor because there's only so much room in this pelvis. And if your bowels are full, then they're pushing on the bladder, and it increases your likelihood of leaking and having issues. And also, if you're constipated, you have to strain. So you're pushing down on that pelvic floor, and the pelvic floor is being overstretched every time you go to the toilet. So constipation isn't normal. Well, it is kind of normal, but it's not okay, right? It's 100% not okay. And if you go to a doctor and all they can offer you is laxatives, then you need to kind of like widen your sphere and go, right, okay, so what alternative and complementary kind of therapies can I use? What approaches can I take? Because constipation is a fundamental sign of health, and it's something that we shouldn't be constipated. Lower back pain. This is an interesting one. I've worked with a number of active women who have lower back pain, and it is all linked to constipation sometimes, but also linked to their pelvic floor strength. And actually that's the missing link. So if you've been to the physio, you've done loads of Pilates, loads of, and it's just not working, then maybe it might be a pelvic floor thing. Sexual discomfort goes back to what I was saying about sexual abuse. You don't have to be abused to have to find sex uncomfortable. Sex shouldn't be uncomfortable. And if it is uncomfortable, then again, you need to go and get some help with that. There's so many people out there that can help. Like, of course, finding a GP that is able to talk to you about this will help, but also women's health physios, who I will talk about in more detail later on in the talk, because I know I keep mentioning them. Prolapse symptoms are often when I say prolapse, people go, please don't talk to me about that, as if not knowing will prevent you from getting a prolapse. That it will not, but we need to know. Okay. So prolapse symptoms, there is full-on prolapse where it is obvious, like things are falling out of your vagina. That is hard to get a full-on prolapse. Okay. Low-lying prolapse is a dragging feelings of heaviness, feelings of discomfort, like as if you've got like heavy period cramps in your vagina, and it's where your vaginal wall kind of like that, it kind of goes up into that pelvic ball. The vagina just doesn't have the strength to hold everything that's above it, and it means that some of the bit of the bladder, bit of the uterus, or the bit of the bowel will fall down into the vagina. Now, in a lot of postnatal women and menopausal women, it may only happen after you've done a heavy weight session at the end of a day. If you've got a baby, after you've been carrying your baby for a while, and then you go to bed and it's all right. But with all these things, if your body is whispering at you that something's not right and something's not okay, you need to take action now, because the fix is blooming easy when it's at that end of the spectrum. If you leave it and let it progress, then your options are really small, and they become medical and surgical. And women are petrified when it comes to prolapse because of all the bad press that has been happening around mesh surgery and all the the gynecological scares. No one can force you to have surgery. It's totally your choice. And the sooner that you start taking action, the better. If you have difficulty inserting or wearing tampons and you want to wear them, or menstrual cups, then that could be a sign that your pelvic floor is too tight, as in it doesn't have the correct range of movement. Bleeding is never good, apart from if you know it's part of your period, but bleeding in any part of your body is never good. And so if you are bleeding, if you're bleeding after you've emptied your bowels, or like, blood's coming from anywhere, you need to go and get that checked out. Like if you flip that to having a cut on your head, if you suddenly randomly started cutting out of your bleeding out of your head, you wouldn't ignore it. So you have to go and get some help and support. Unable to fully empty your bladder. So often many women kind of feel that they will go to the toilet, get up again, and they feel they've got a little bit left in, and then they sit back down again, and it all happens. And it might just be that there's like a little pocket, and that when you stand up, it gets back out again. That's, again, maybe a sign of the pelvic floor being being too tight, and that you need to learn how to fully relax on the toilet. Some women just don't take enough time to go to the toilet, so that could be an issue. And then go into the toilet just in case, which athletes do. Culture within your sport, within your training group, within the women that you ride with, around what are the toilet habits? Does everyone go for a sneaky wee or whatever? Like, you might have a pee tree. Like, there's so many, and all this jokey stuff. It means that it's like, it's normalizing it, and it's making it a joke, and it's saying you can laugh about it, and you can laugh about it, but it's like, well, what? Shouldn't we just go and get a really good women's health physio who's local to come in and give us a chat about this, so that we don't all have to go to the pee tree like 3 times before we go out on a ride? So it's kind of like thinking about how often you go into the toilet. All right. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the practical first of all. You don't have to stress out about the practical. It's going to be really, really easy. Well, it's really hard, but it's not challenging. This is not a modern approach to pelvic floor training. So I've done this presentation quite a few times, to be quite honest, but I've added a few things in, and I was just looking at, okay, so what do people feel is the modern approach to pelvic floor training? So it says modifying core exercises to reduce the load in the pelvic floor. So you think, great, nice one. And then you read through it. It's avoid this, avoid that, avoid something else. That's not okay. Like, you never tell a woman to stop doing anything. It's like a red rag to a bull. Like, you can't say avoid, and you can't say stop. So what we need to get better at, all coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, anyone supporting women, there needs to be a safe space for women to say, I can't do that. And they might not be able to tell you why, but instead of giving them a really, really simple exercise in the corner, which is like nothing, they still want to work hard. How can you regress exercises so it's still loading them, but it's not hurting it's not damaging the pelvic floor or causing them to leak? And so the language we use around this is really, really important. It's not about stopping, it's not about avoiding, it's about adapting the exercises. Because if you think, I've worked with a power lifter I've worked with loads of women who shouldn't, in my opinion, be doing the exercise that they are doing, right? So I've worked with a power lifter whose tampons were flying out every time she lifted, but powerlifting to her was the most important thing in her life. It was literally the only thing holding her marriage together, was the fact that she was powerlifting. I've worked with a single mum who adored running, whose husband left her 3 months after having her 3rd child, and running was what kept her like sane. I could not tell that either of those women to stop doing what they were doing. So we had to adapt their sessions, and we adapted their sessions by getting some support clothing, sorting out their constipation, making sure that they were wearing vaginal supports, making sure that they were using their breath in a way that didn't compromise their pelvic floor health. There is always things that you can do. You should never, ever say, don't do this. And if they say, and if you say, if a woman says, actually, when I go out for like a 2-hour ride, I'm totally grand. As soon as I go to 3, that becomes a problem for me in terms of like, I just can't hold on anymore. And it's like, okay, so can we introduce a toilet stop at 90 minutes in? Can we Can we adapt what you're drinking so that it doesn't aggravate your bladder? Like, just talk and discuss and work out different ways, but we should never ever stop women from doing what they really, really love. That is the most important thing with all of this. Although fundamentally, I really believe that pelvic floor health has to be a priority. Actually, keeping women moving and doing exercise is far more important. The biggest killer of midlife women is cardiac disease, and osteoporosis is a massive issue as well. So it's like we have to keep women moving and doing what they love. Okay, so this is just an example of Sophie Powers, who's an ultramarathon runner, who some of you may have seen. She had a famous picture of her doing an ultramarathon when she was breastfeeding, and she was breastfeeding and she did incredibly well. So she's now had her third baby, and she had booked in to do an ultramarathon 12 weeks after having this baby. And this is kind of like, this is often the narrative as well with postnatal women, is this kind of badge of honor, and this kind of like, we're going to come in and I'm going to get back to training, or I'm going to do this competition because look at Serena Williams and look at all these amazing people who have like bounced back and done incredibly well. And actually, sometimes your body doesn't let you do that. And that's what, and the pelvic floor training has to be a fundamental part of what you do. And actually, she ended up not doing that ultramarathon, even though she really wanted to, because of the work she was doing with a women's health physio. But this is the crazy way to adapt exercise, but her body was ready for it. Okay, so we are going to do some practical. What I need you all to do is, I want you to take your shoes and socks off for me, please, and stand up, okay? I would love it if I could see some people, because then I can just like coach you. If you can, that would be absolutely brilliant. Thank you. If you don't feel you can stand up, you can do this seated. That's totally grand. But I want you to be in bare feet, and you don't need anything active wear on. We're literally just doing it in standing. Okay. Right, let me get my tech organized, which basically means putting my computer on a coffee table. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna coach you all via Zoom. If you're a guy, you can still do this. I will be referencing vaginas, but you just have to imagine what's going on down there. But you can still work out how to lift your pelvic floor, and you can work out how to coach it as well. I'll be asking you to come into the chat just to kind of give me a bit of information on like how you're finding it and whether it's working for you. All right. Those of you, well, in fact, everybody, ignore everything that you know about pelvic floor. Okay. So I want you to give me a blank piece of paper in terms of like how to do it. Right. Because some of you will have been told, you'll have these old wives' tales, and you'll have a health visitor might have told you something, a coach might have told you something, a yoga teacher might have told you something. Just ignore all that, and then see how I coach it, and then see what you feel differently. Okay, so we're just going to start in standing, and all I want you to do is, if anyone's done any yoga before, and at the start of the class they always tell you to like ground your feet, and what they do is they get you to let's put my mic on. They get you to kind of bend your knees ever so slightly, and then get the weight onto the outside of your feet and spread your toes. So your toes aren't all crumpled up, but you can feel the weight in your feet. Okay. And we're just gonna, just so we're not rolling in. Okay. And then I want you to relax your tummy. Now, when I'm doing this live, everyone's like, what? Like, no one has ever told me to relax my tummy. It feels disgusting and it's massive, and I really, really don't want to do this. So remember what I said about this pelvic floor. It works with your diaphragm. If you all tighten your tummy super, super, super tight for me, and then try and breathe, you just can't, right? You cannot breathe properly with a super tight tummy. So if you're holding on, even 10-20%, it affects your breathing. So if you're doing a specific interval training session, or a specific training session, like or a strength and conditioning session, or a circuit session, whatever it might be, and you need to grip your tummy, arguably I would say you don't have to, but let's just say crack on and do that. All right. So you've got an hour a day, 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, however many times of training, you just do that with your tummy. The rest of the time it has to be relaxed. And this will blow your mind, because you'll be like, I literally walk around the whole time holding my tummy in. All right, but I'm just going to keep on reminding you to relax and let go, relax and let go. Okay, so we're in standing. We've got our feet, my feet are kind of hip width apart. I can feel the ground pushing up against them. I've relaxed my tummy. Relax your tummy again, because it will have tightened up. Okay, relax your tummy. And then I want you to push down a little bit into your pelvic floor, which is a little bit like pushing down for a poo, slightly, not a big one, just a small one. Push down a little bit and then let go. Because what happens is, especially if you've got a tight pelvic floor, okay, your pelvic floor sits quite high in your pelvis. So even when I say relax, like nothing happens. You have to kind of push down a little bit and then relax from there. You need to get it down so we can get the full range of movement going. All right. And all we're going to do to begin with is breathe. Okay, so all I want you to do is put your hand on your tummy for me. So if you put your hand kind of on your lower tummy, which is lovely, soft and relaxed, and let go, and start to breathe in and out. So as we inhale, the tummy comes out, not as much as my hands are doing. It will not expand that much. And then on the exhale, just draw it. Just exhale naturally. You don't need to draw anything in. So we're just inhaling in and exhaling. Inhaling in and exhaling. Now, some of you will find this hard, right? We haven't even got to the pelvic floor bit. Some of you will find this hard because you can't relax and you can't move, and you find this really weird. And some of you might feel that actually your breath only gets just below your bra line. Like you'll be like, oh, I can't feel it down towards my belly button. And your athletes will feel exactly the same. They might feel, so ideally you should feel as you inhale, and just start visualizing this now, that as you're inhaling, that breath is going down into your pelvis. You should feel that potentially that pelvic floor is expanding on the inhale, and then on the exhale, it's just nicely, softly, gently coming back in together again. Okay, so it's just nice and soft and gentle. So inhaling and exhaling. Okay, we're going to add on the pelvic floor piece. Okay, we're doing well for time. So just keep breathing normally now. Just ignore that bit. I will go back to it. Stick with this visualization. You might not have heard it described this way before. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine that you are picking up a Malteser with your back passage. So we're going to pick up a Malteser with our back passage, and then we're going to relax and let go. You can giggle, it's fine. We're going to pick up a Malteser, and then we're going to relax and let go. Okay, now do the same towards the front. So for women in the room, it'd be towards your vagina. I want you to imagine that you're picking up and then letting go, picking up and letting go. And then do both. So we're going to do back and front and then let go, back and front and then let go. Okay. It's really important that we do the back, because look at the amount of muscle at the back. Okay, there's a huge amount of muscle. That's your back passage there. There's a huge amount of muscle around the back passage. Okay, so if you don't get the back going, it's kind of a waste, right? However, it's also really important that we get some kind of movement going around the front, because we need to support that urethra. Okay, so that's where most people do have fecal incontinence, but most people will have urinary incontinence, and so we have to get this part of our pelvic floor moving as well. Okay, so all that little connection piece is, you know, when you do a deadlift, or even if you haven't done one, you can imagine it, you've seen it done before. You see people kind of set their bodies and then they lift the weight. So you would never see somebody attempt to do a deadlift with like a floppy body. They wouldn't be able to transfer any load onto that bar with a relaxed body. They have to have some form of tone and tension in their system to transfer the load onto that barbell. This is the same with the pelvic floor. We need a bit of tone and tension before we lift. So we don't just like lift from nothing. We lift with a bit of tone and tension. And that's just what I call the set, that set, what we've just done. So then we do the full-on lift, which is imagining, for the women in the room, imagining that you are drawing up a sort of a tampon up through your vagina towards your belly button. So we're kind of drawing up internally, and then we relax, let go. Okay. So, and for men, I will do a visualization for men. So for men, what works for men is that if imagine you're walking into a really, really freezing cold sea, and as you get into the sea, the water approaches your testicles, and you want to lift them up out of the water, and then you want to relax, let go, and then you want to lift them up out of the water, and then you want to relax, let go. And that's the kind of visualization. Not always, but that works generally for men. But let's stick with the women for tonight. So we're going to do that over and over again. So relax your tummies, get your feet on, relax your tummies. And I want you to connect the back and the front, and then draw up that tampon through your vagina, and then relax, drop, and let go. I will be adding in the breath in a second, and I'll be asking you some questions. We're going to do the back and then the front, and then we're going to draw up, and then we're going to relax and let go. Make sure you get the relax, let go. Let's add in the breath. So just follow my lead. We're going to inhale in, start to exhale, and then do back, front, draw up, relax, let go. The breath may well be the straw that broke the camel's back. You might be like, I had it until you made me do the breathing. It's all right, stick with me. We're going to do inhale, connect, back and front, and then draw up. Okay, relax there. Right. I'm going to answer your question, Rosie. You won't be the only one. Can you just write in the chat, ideally to everybody, what you feel your score out of 10 is in terms of your ability to do that, please? Right. We've just had a comment saying I can't do it without tensing my tummy. And some people will be tensing their tummy, some people will be tensing their glutes, and some people will be tensing their faces. Okay, they'll be like, ugh. So what we've got to realize is this pelvic floor is small, and this pelvic floor is weak relative to the global system, and we've never really activated it before. I'm not seeing any of this chat. Who's seeing this chat? Oh, here we go. Brilliant. Getting it. It's all coming through now. So if you are feeling that other things are kicking in, then back off the effort. Do less work. You've got to imagine that this pelvic floor is everything else is shouting and really wants to come and join the party, and the pelvic floor needs nurturing and just needs a bit of space. So you just need to back off the work, which is very difficult to do when you're used to trying really hard at doing something physical. Okay, brilliant, guys. You've done really, really well. Really great scores here. So what I want to do now is I want everybody to lie down for me, please. Okay, so you can lie down on your back if you can. If you're pregnant, please do not lie down. Well, you can lie down on your back, to be honest. If you're uncomfortable lying down on your back, then don't. You can lie on your side. If you want to sit down, that's fine. But I'd like you to lie down, feet flat on the floor, or knees or legs down is totally fine. Feel comfortable. Feel really, really comfortable. And then once you've got yourself settled down, just start to do that breath work that we did. Okay. Okay, so just start, and you might want to put your hand on your tummy and start to feel your tummy rise and fall. This is the breathing one is a really nice thing to do in the bath. So if you want to have a bath, kind of start doing this breath work by seeing your tummy come in and out of the water, so that you can just see that your tummy's, you can see from the water level if it's working or not, and it's just a really nice way of working out and you know, you can see it happening, which is really good. Okay, I can't see anybody now because you're all lying down, but that's fine. Okay, so we're going to add in the back and the front. So we're just going to connect back and front and relax and let go. Connect back and front and relax and let go. I'll do it a little bit slower. Connect back and front. So this is Maltesers. Relax and let go. Okay. Now let's add on the draw up. So we're going to do back, front, draw up through your vagina and relax. Back, front, draw up through your vagina and relax. And you might want to wiggle to relax. My shoulders slouch. Okay, I'm gonna go into that a sec. Right. Back, front, draw up through your vagina and relax. Okay, let's add in the breath. We're going to inhale in, just gentle. Start exhaling, and then back, front, draw up and relax. One more, inhaling in, back, front, draw up and relax. Okay, can you now please, I've got a couple of comments here which I'm going to answer, but can you now, I want you to compare how that feels to standing. So can you score yourself, it's all very subjective, but score yourself in lying, and if you comment easier, harder, the same, it'd be great to know. Okay, easier, better, slightly easier. Don't follow the crowd. If you found it harder, that's fine. Okay, brilliant. So most people commenting are saying it felt easier. I've had one person say harder. Right, so there is no right answer. If you are finding it easier, it is probably because you don't have any weight to lift, right? So in lying, your pelvis is now here, right? So it hasn't got to carry the 20, 30, however many kilos that is above it that you have to carry in standing. So if you're in lying, it is easier. If you are finding it harder, it might just be because you haven't got any weight to lift and you're like, I just can't get anything going. So there's no right or wrong. And the pelvic floor is so individual. It's such an individual thing. We've all had such a different life experience in terms of our sexual experience, in terms of our confidence in connecting with this part of our body, in terms of whether we've had babies or not, in terms of our age, in terms of just about, you know, our genetic profile, like the whole thing really, it just makes this whole thing like really individualized. But I just wanted to, but the thing, what we need to do is we need to, so when I went through that, I posted that article saying this is not the modern approach to pelvic floor work. The modern approach to pelvic floor work is not what you've just done, but that's where you start. So if you were on the floor and you're like, oh yeah, this is an 8, this is a good 8, and then you stand up and it's a 5 or a 6, like you have to start on the floor. But nobody has pelvic floor issues lying down. Everyone has the pelvic floor issues in standing when they're in the gym or at the end of a ride. So we therefore have to make this functional, okay? But that may take 3 months, might take a bit longer, might take 6 weeks. But the intention is to get you off the floor with your pelvic floor work. But that can take a week, that can take quite a long time. But there is always hope, and that's where we are moving towards, okay? And in terms of how much you should be doing, every woman, so anyone I would say from the age of 16 should be doing their pelvic floor exercises every day, and you should be doing 10 of the things we've just been doing. There's a brilliant app from the NHS called Squeezy. It's £3 to download, and there's nothing magic about it apart from it makes you do the exercises, okay? So it will kind of, it's a timer, so it will time you to do your exercises properly, and then it also makes sure that you do 10. And if you don't have that, you go, oh, I've done 5, I'm sure that's 8, I'll do 2 more, or I'll do 1 more, and you end up only doing 6. So every woman should be doing 10 pelvic floor exercises a day. If you have dysfunction, so if you are leaking, you should be doing it 2 to 3 times a day. And if after a month nothing has happened, you 100% have to go and see a women's health physio. I would say you have to go private, to be quite honest, especially with what's going on right now. Like there are amazing women's health. The women's health physios in the NHS are absolutely fantastic. You just can't get to them. So like, unless, you know, it's a postcode lottery, and they're really unlikely to see sporty people. They will have that's not true. That is not true. They will see you, but it's just, you just have to wait ages to go and see them. And then you might go and see once for an assessment. They might not do an internal examination. You have to wait 3 weeks to go back again. Whereas actually, if you go to a private clinic, you can get in much quicker than that, and you can get the care that you need, and you can get the time that you and for the assessment as well. A women's health physio is a normal physio. So they've done their MSK training, and then they specialize in women's health. Now, women's health is not a protected term, which is a really, really annoying thing. So kind of anyone can call themselves a women's health physio. Now, generally, they are all brilliant because you're kind of working with women in vulnerable situations. So they're generally all great, but it is worth doing a little bit of homework. So you have to, it is worth phone, especially if you're kind of like thinking about getting a local one in to do a little talk to your riders, and they will probably do it for free, or they'll probably do it for like 100 quid or something, not very much money, because you're essentially going to be that you're introducing them to a group of women, and they'll probably do something like I've done tonight, like where they will come in and teach you all how to do pelvic floor exercises, and then on the hope that actually some of the women will go in and see them. They must be able to do an internal examination. 90% of them do, but there are some out there that call themselves women's health physios that do not do internal exams. And that is, to me, there's no way you can assess a woman's pelvic floor unless you could do an internal examination. If you are really uncomfortable having an internal examination for whatever reason, then they can still do a really accurate assessment. But most of the time, I think that is, and they're very appropriate, obviously, when they do it. But I just think that women's health physios are a totally underused resource, and it's something that should, and to be honest, I think we should all be going, I recommend that pregnant people go to work out like how that, the best way for them to have their babies, definitely postnatally, definitely perimenopause and menopause, and athletically as well. Like, it's really worth like having this kind of support on the radar. So yeah, do the exercises. There was a couple of questions here. Easier. I used to tensing my tummy during sit-ups, deadlifts. No. So this is not, I use this term called tension for task. Okay. So you need to be using the required amount of tension to do the task you are asking your body to do. So if you are doing a body weight squat, that is not a lot of tension required, right? Some people will do it with a proper gym face, game face on, right? They will like tense their whole bodies and they will go for it. But that's creating too much tension in the body. You don't need that. You need huge amounts of tension to lift 50, 60, 70 kilos worth of weight. You do not need that amount of tension for the lower levels. So it's all about using the appropriate amount of tension and managing the pressure inside of your body. What is the best pelvic floor position breathing, please? So I think I've explained what the best pelvic floor position is. It's where you need to start is the best place. And there was any other questions coming up? My shoulders slouch, relaxing my stomach and lower back over arches and standing surely itself. Yeah, so can't quite understand that question, but I will do my best at interpreting it. I think a lot of like postural issues, in that if you're in that chronically flexed position, then you're kind of coming down onto your pelvic floor, and so you're putting quite a lot of pressure on there. So yeah, posturally, that's a part of the holistic, the sort of the holistic approach to all of this.
Can I just add in another question that we've had over on YouTube?
Yeah, of course.
So it is, if someone has a tilted pelvis, is it more difficult to strengthen the pelvic floor?
Yes. Well, I mean, kind of, in that it's not aligned with the diaphragm, but I think, bodies come in all shapes and sizes and all, and everyone moves in very, very different ways. So I think there's always ways of adapting it. I would say that if you feel you're not getting this, I would expect, within 10 days of doing this, everyone to kind of get it, right? So neurally, that's how long the body takes to connect in and learn the skill. In terms of the muscle developing, in terms of any hypertrophy or any muscle gain, that will take 2 to 3 months, like any other part of your body. So if you're doing this and you think you've got how I've explained it, and you're like, I'm not feeling it, I'm not getting anything, I'm not bothered about results will take a little bit longer, but if you feel like you've worked out the process and you're feeling what you should be feeling and you're not getting it, then 100% you should go and get someone to help. Any other questions?
I think you've covered all the ones that were coming in, so thank you for that.
Okay. I think the only other thing I was going to say, if this hasn't gone off again, here we go. Well, I know we're going to do breakout rooms. Oh, beg your pardon. So I've done that. I've done all that. Okay. Is that I set up a 10% discount code for everyone on this call this evening for the rest of April for anything on the well. So we've got a brilliant webinar tomorrow on perimenopause and lifestyle with Dr. Hannah Short, who's an expert in perimenopause. And we've got one next week on hormonal contraception and the impact that can potentially have on training with Dr. Emma Ross and Dr. Bella. And then we've got our courses as well. So if anyone wants to have a look at our website or look at any of those, then they're really welcome to. And for the rest of April, you've got 10% off. If you use the code, Julia, would you mind putting it in the chat? If you use the code IGNITE10, then you can benefit from that discount.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, I think I'm done. Julia, have you got any questions?
No, that's been absolutely fascinating. To be honest, I forgot at one point that I was actually supposed to kind of, take this back over. I was so ingrained in the workshop. Yeah, I mean, I presume I'm talking for everybody else as well, but I've learned so much just in that short amount of time. So thank you. And also just for talking about everything so kind of honestly and openly. I think that's been one of the themes so far of the webinars, is just that kind of being able to talk about things that happen to us all in a way that's just using the normal kind of language. So yeah, thank you very much for that. So if anybody does have any questions, do just put them in the chat, because we'll pick them up and ask Baz to help. But what we're going to do now is we are going to go into breakout rooms. Obviously, it is a sensitive topic, so feel free to, be as open as you'd like to. But what I'd really like you to think about is, given all of the information that we've just learnt, how can we start to think about that in our own training and our own coaching? And more importantly, I suppose, for this evening's audience, is kind of how you can start having those conversations and making sure people are talking about it, making sure people know where to find help. So we'll go into breakout rooms and just have a think about how we can start putting some of this into practice, either as a rider in your own training, or if you're a coach. So talking to your riders. Just wanted to say thank you to Chris as well. He was getting involved then and added in some comments that your visualizations helped him as well. So thank you for giving both options. So as always, we'll come back into the main group again shortly. So do keep thinking about questions. I'm sure Baz is more than happy to help. And yeah, I'm not sure how long we'll have Robbie. Is it 10 minutes maybe?
10 minutes. Remember, it's about networking as well. So introduce yourself and then have a conversation about what this means for your for your practice. I'll close in 10 minutes.
Brilliant, thank you. So Okay, welcome back everybody. Just waiting for everybody to come back into the main room. Brilliant. Okay, that looks like everybody's back. Yeah, so as always, it's really useful just to have that breakout room time at the end, just to go through what we've been talking about. And I think the main points that were raised in the room that I was in was just that it's a little bit concerning how little we knew about this beforehand, and how I think one of the suggestions was that every health visitor needs to go around with your model of a pelvic floor, Baz. So if you could arrange for that to happen, that would be great. And also just a bit of a discussion about how we can promote all of this information through our network. So I think in our little group we had a breeze champion, a rider, and a coach. So it's kind of within all of our networks we can all share hopefully information that you can share with us, Baz, and then just start those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you shouldn't feel like you have to know it all. Like you shouldn't feel like you have to know the answers. You just have to be able to hold the space. You have to be able to hold the space so women can talk, and women will talk. They will talk as soon as you like create an environment in which you feel they can. And often the solutions are fairly easy, and then yeah, without a doubt.
Baz, can I just ask a question? From our group, we were very similar. We had a mixture, and it was all, there's very much ingrained habits, and we all recognise several of them. But one of the things was looking at women's health practitioner, and is there anywhere that you can sort of say where we will go to look to find a women's health practitioner?
Yeah, I should have mentioned it. There's on the Squeezy app there is a directory of women's health physiotherapists. So you can go on the website, so you don't have to download the app. You can go on the website and find the directory there, or you can go onto the app and there'll be a directory. It's the best we've got, right? There will be people who are brilliant who are not on that directory, but it means that the people that are on that directory have the right kind of have a POG, or members of the Obs and Gynae physiotherapy, POGP website. So it's just come up. So there's also the POGP website is the other one. I find that slightly harder to use, but the POGP website or the Squeezy app. And then I think, if you're like, okay, I've got someone locally, just talk to them and see what, you'll kind of get a sense. But I think that those two resources are good ones.
That's brilliant. That's because there was quite a few people that were looking at trying to arrange something for them.
And I just think you want to kind of, you want to set up a relationship, and it's not like and it's saying, okay, like you've got the breeze champion should the breeze, I don't know the correct terms, the breeze volunteers, like find someone locally and say like, can you come out on a ride with us, or can you come and talk to us, or like, can you start building up relationships? Because, and I think women's health physios, like personal trainers are really good at promoting themselves because that's their thing. Like they have to promote themselves to get sales. Physios are less confident sometimes, and I'm not saying all of them, but sometimes. So it might just take you going to them and saying like, can you come and help us? Like we'd love you to help to talk and and see what you can do there.
Brilliant. That's really useful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Baz, and thank you to Gillian in the chat as well, just for putting the POGP website in there as well. It's difficult to say, isn't it? Karen, was there anything else from your breakout room that you wanted to share?
No, I think it was much the same as you. There was evidence and riders and who wouldn't come out on breeze rides because it was time of the month, or and we all identified that we had several of those sort of issues that we hadn't even really thought about. They were just, that's what happens. But we did have Melissa was on the call and was saying that she's noticed it even with the sort of the teenage 14 to 16-year-old girls that she's working with, is the got to go to the loo or not drinking enough because they're worried about being on their bike for a long length of time. So I think and the recognition that getting to those people earlier, and it's not just about teaching the people that are suffering, but getting to those people that are sort of seeing what their mums and their grandparents are going through, and assuming that that's normal, and actually should we making them aware at a much earlier age. And we
know that there's a brilliant report from ROCOG, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, in 2019 called Better Women, and we know that women in woefully uneducated about every single life stage. But we also know that if you need to stop the circle at some point, and if you teach them about puberty, they're more set up for fertility, they're more set up for pre and postnatal, they're more set up. So you have to get in, and I think you're exactly right. At 14, 16, if you can get that age group just to educate and understand the normal, they understand what normal is, then you're setting them up to own their health and to be, to really be able to advocate for themselves, which I think, many women, myself included, have not had the education or the culture in which that's been possible.
Yeah, no, it's been really good. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. That leads us nicely on, actually, just talking about kind of younger riders. Just wondering, Kira, would you mind just, if you're still there, just unmuting yourself and just giving us a bit of information from your point of view?
Yeah, so I'm a junior rider at the moment, and I'm also coaching, and I've been within the sport for about 5 years now. I think from a younger perspective, it's important to, like, as you just said, to start talking about it around Youth B, Youth A age level. So when the riders are starting to progress onto RSR sessions, when they're starting to do more gym work, to build strength training into the sessions, and making it aware for when they're just riding, so they know about it. So it's just general awareness of teaching the younger riders what is the right and wrong things to be doing to help them.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Kira. Yeah, I've made a note of that, because I think it's something that we need to think about at British Cycling, kind of how we take a lot of this information forward, and how we can make sure that we're supporting people to have those conversations. So thanks for that. Is there anybody else that wanted to highlight anything else that they'd spoken about in their breakout room? Feel free to unmute yourself or put something in the chat.
I'll go if you want, Julia.
Oh, thanks, Sue.
Yeah, we found there's only 4 of us, but a lot of it was psychological. Was the issue. A lady that did breeze rides, that would work out the best hedges that she could put in her route to make sure that, because she thought that she couldn't go for an hour, but she actually sought some help out and can now go for 2 hours and wait until she gets to the cafe. So that was all sorted. Another lady who just didn't like using public toilets could go for hours and then just go when she got home. And so between us, we just worked out that it was more psychological. I had a question actually that we didn't get to answer. I randomly thought about the other day. When you're watching the pro peloton and the men, you see them peeing on the bike on the side of the road. What do the girls do? They're still racing for 3-4 hours. I don't know, but unless someone might be able to, the longest I've ever raced is about 2 hours, so I'm good. But what do the professional women do?
So Lizzie Daigan,
I don't even know.
Lizzie Daigan answered this question on a webinar that she did with somebody, and she said they kind of politely say, I need the toilet, and then the peloton will really slow down, and then they go to the toilet and come back in. That's what she said. But yeah, she got asked that question quite a lot of times, apparently.
Yeah, that makes sense. But the guys certainly get it easier. They even get someone to push them as well while they're peeing.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd like that job, to be fair. No, thanks, Sue. That's a really good question. Just a comment actually from Mandy in the chat about different kind of food and caffeine impacting bladder control. Baz, is there anything else that you could expand on that? So, for example, specifically, I suppose, on caffeine, which I'm sure we're all.
It's and as we age, we get more sensitive to these things, and alcohol as well, unfortunately. So for those less serious about their sport, so you can. It's good. It's this whole thing around women's health is it's really good to understand your body's reaction to these things. So if often if you think about temperature as well, some people find that when it's cold, their bladder is very, very sensitive, so they need the toilet a lot more when it's cold. But if it's having that body, what we call body literacy, it's understanding that. And so when whether it's spicy foods, caffeine, sugar, refined carbohydrates and alcohol are the key things that tend to irritate our bladder or our bowels. And it might be at certain times of the month, they might be more irritable, and it might be as you age, you might become more and more sensitive to it. So it's just having a really good body awareness of the impact these things have, and not just taking gels with caffeine in because everyone else is doing it, going, that does not work for me because that really irritates me, and therefore I'm going to look for other things.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Okay, does anybody have any more questions? I think we've covered so much ground this evening. I'm sure everybody's just sort of going to go away and think about this all evening. But if anybody does have any,
so yeah, I can I just ask one last question?
Yes, of course, please do.
Okay, so I'm the lady who can hold a wee in for hours and hours and hours. If I'm doing that, is that actually a healthy thing to do? Because you are told, like, at the other end, you're not supposed to hold your feces in because it can eventually damage your colon. So is it a good idea to actually hold your urine in for a long time?
No, it is not. It is not. Listen
Right.
up. Right. Here we go. You won't be the only one. So we just talked about that in our breakout room, actually. There's such a thing called nurses' bladder, okay? And it's nurses, anaesthetists, teachers, shop assistants, people that feel they do not have enough time to go to the toilet because of their job, or they just kind of choose not to. So as our bladder, and I haven't, within the courses, I go into far more detail on like bladder and bowels, but essentially as urine drops into our bladder, it starts to expand, and it gives those stretch receptors, gives our brain a signal that we need a wee, right? And that tends to happen around about 150, 200 mils. And you go, it's all right, I'm in a meeting or I'm on a ride, I can ignore it. And then it stretches a wee bit more and you get another signal. If you are not reacting to that message, you'll stop receiving the message, and so your bladder just gets overstretches. Now, when you are younger, that is not a problem because your connective tissue is bouncy and your bladder will bounce back. Let this be a word of warning for you, Joanna, seeing as you are, and I'm using you because you were brave enough to ask a question. I have just finished working with a 65-year-old physiotherapist who is exactly the same, right? She's postmenopausal. Her connective tissue does not have that ability to bounce back, and she has what we call floppy bladder. You do not want a floppy bladder where it won't bounce back. So it will get to the point where if it's overstretched so much, and this isn't a scare story, and it's not going to happen tomorrow. It happens over time. But if you keep overstretching your bladder, it will stop bouncing back, and then that becomes a problem. So what you need to do, you need to right now set an alarm on your phone, and every 3 hours you need to go to the toilet, and you will not want to, but over time you will start to you will start to feel the need to go again, because at the moment you won't be getting those messages from your body that you need to go because you've clocked off from them. So just every 3 hours, set up an accountability group, tell someone this is what you're doing, and then tell them that you've gone and you need to go every 3 hours. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll stop doing that then. I'll go more often. Thank you.
And the person that said, what about little and often? Right, that's the same. Sorry, I'm on a roll.
Go on, carry on.
So the problem with little and often is that you're kind of training your pelvic floor only to hold 50 to 100 mils of urine. So you're oversensitive. And if you think about as we age, we want a pelvic floor that's strong enough to hold a bladder with 3 to 400 mils of urine. And if you're going all little and often, it's not doing that. And it's generally not always. It's either a carryover from when you were little and your mum said go just in case, or it's because from pregnancy or childbirth and you just when you always need the toilet because you've got a baby sat on your bladder. And it's retraining your system and it's a behavioral thing. It might be increasing pelvic floor strength, but it's also saying, I just went half an hour ago. I will be okay. I don't need to go now before I go on the school run or before I go to the shops. And do the safe bits, do the bits safe where you feel really safe, stretching it out. And then you just want to over time just stretch the amount of time you're taking.
Thank you.
A litre. I don't know who was told their bladder should hold a litre. That's not true. That's a lot of urine. It might be ultimately, that might be like the absolute, that is not a normal day amount of urine to be holding. No.
Brilliant. I don't know if my favourite quote from this evening is "You never tell a woman to stop doing anything," or "Nobody wants a floppy bladder." Some excellent quotes. But yeah, so much information. I've been taking notes.
Okay.
Yeah, just one final thing from yourself, Baz. Would you mind just giving us some information on where we can find out more?
About me, about us, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you go on to we've got a hyphen in our website, which is really annoying, but it's thewell-hq.com. And we are all over. We do lots on social media, lots of stuff like floppy bladders, lots of stuff on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram. We're doing the webinars, and we do courses as well. And we're doing lots of consultancy work now with lots of governing bodies, and hopefully we'll be doing a little bit more with British Cycling. And it's just we cover everything to do with women's health, and it's about normalizing it. It's about giving everyone the vocabulary and everyone the permission to use that vocabulary in an appropriate way, which I really hope like tonight has kind of like shown you is possible.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much for that, Baz. That's been just been absolutely fascinating. Thank you for everybody for your contributions and for your questions, and for being brave and asking those questions in front of everybody.
Yeah, well done. It's not easy. Thank you.
Definitely not. So Robbie has just put a link to the website in the chat, and remember there is the discount code of Ignite10 that you can use, and as we said before, if you want to tag us or the Well into any Twitter post, it's at the Well HQ and at BC Coaches and hashtag Ignite Monthly. Robbie has also put the recording from this webinar into the chat box as well, so do take that and share it. I'm sure lots of you will be aware of people that couldn't make it this evening, or family members, so yeah, do share it, and then obviously share the website in case there's things in future that people want to access. And just finally, just that the webinar is only going to be available, the recording is only going to be available for 1 week, so do try and watch it before then. So next session is going to be on the 19th of May. Just quickly consult my notes. So we're going to be hearing from Isabel Duxfield on putting inclusion into action. So lots and lots of information to take away from this evening. Hopefully see you again on the 19th of May. Thank you again so much, Baz, for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
And I'm sure we'll speak to you at some point soon.
Thank you. All right.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.